Hello everyone and welcome to Money Talks. I'm Brooks Page and we're lucky today to have on our show Trey Jones. Now Trey's a teacher at the Hart County High School and he's also involved in the College and Career Academy. And Trey, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Brooks. It's glad to be here today.
Good. Welcome to the show. We want to get started off by talking a little bit about Trey, what's his background and where he's from. And Trey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm a teacher at Hart County High School. This is my 4th year there, and I've been teaching math for over 10 years total, but 4 years in Hart County. However, I was born and raised in Hart County and graduated myself from Hart County High School in 2006 and have spent a few years in Madison County teaching there, but really had a heart for coming back to my hometown and wanting to work with the students here at Hart County High School. As you said, I'm a teacher and I do teach math, but more than teaching algebra and geometry and trigonometry and things like that, I've really found a great passion for teaching real world aspects to math, and specifically some dealings with financial situations that students face both in high school and directly out of high school as well.
Yeah. And I know I've enjoyed coming to your class a time or two and talking to your kids, and that's a real enjoyment to hear some of their questions and talk to them about finance. And
they definitely come up with some very creative questions for you.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
They do. It's an enjoyment to come down there and do that. So
that's right. Well, I'm glad I could return the favor today and come to your world for a short time.
Glad to have you. What made you become an educator?
Well, I had some great educators in my life, some teachers who really made a big impact on me. And from then on, I said, if they can make that kind of impact on me, I think I can make that kind of impact on students myself, and have really just had a passion for that. As early as I remember in middle school, that was kind of the first times I really sensed a great impact that different individuals had on me as teachers. So I found out that I could go into many different areas, and math had always been kind of a strong suit for me. So I said, well, let's do math, and math has taken me to a lot of different areas that are applied to the real world, as I said before.
Yeah. Now you get in, I know you teach math, but you really focus too on financial.
That's right. That's right. The class that I teach at the high school is called Advanced Decision Making. And in the standards that are sent out by the state, we have different financial standards as far as personal finance goes, and looking at different investments and just the comparison of loans versus investing, and letting students see the difference between those has just been really remarkable for students at a young age.
Right.
As you know, as working in the banking industry, that compound interest is a really powerful thing.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you have interest rates on your side and time on your side.
Right.
So if you can have those two things, which our students have the capability to access both of those at their age, it really can change their life.
Oh yeah, and they really need to know a lot of the stuff that we talk to them about. And I know you talk to them about in class, and then when I come and speak to your classes, that some of the things they never really think about, they really need to know, the basics about credit and that kind of thing.
That's exactly right.
So it's a good thing. So why do you feel some of these classes are important to the students there?
Well, when I first had to go ahead to kind of teach some of these classes at Hart County High School, there were great expectations on my part. However, there were also some very lofty expectations that I thought students came in with some knowledge that I quickly found out they're not being taught this in many cases by their parents or by whoever is raising them. That's just not on their radar at that particular time. And some of the questions that we've received from the students have been very eye-opening for me to say, this is something simple, just as simple as writing a check, which I know in today's society we don't write as many checks as we used to, but there are many students who have no idea how to write a check, and then also how to read a check stub when they get paid. Many of our students are just starting to work in the different restaurants in Hartwell or different grocery stores or other businesses, and many of them don't know how to check to see if they're getting paid the right amounts, or
That's right.
how much is being taken out for taxes or for different expenses that they have coming out of their check before they actually get it.
Right. So tell us what some of the specific topics you teach.
Well, in our class, we talk about some of the basic foundations that high schoolers need to have. For example, we teach that high schoolers need to have an emergency fund. And, they may say, well, my emergency fund is my parents. I'm just going to go to them. And you've got kids and I've got kids, and we know that when they need something, we're there for them most of the time. But there's also some things that they have as wants and desires as teenagers that we may not, offer to them as parents at that age. So they can save up their money and go for that. Or, one big thing that my students say they use their emergency fund for is to replace cell phones when they break, or to get them fixed, because that's what a lot of their life revolves around.
Right.
So we start with that, with the basics of establishing an emergency fund.
Right.
Then we talk to them about getting rid of any debts that they do have.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how many 16, 17, 18-year-olds have already started to accumulate debt in their life with purchasing a car, or some of them just owe their parents money for different things that they went to purchase. And there's even some who are 18 who've already received credit card offers and started going into major debt with the credit cards that they have as well.
Right.
From there, we kind of structure it into how do we want to pay for college, or pay for a car as well, which are two big purchases or big items that they're going to need to pay for in the future. So for those who are planning to go to a college, either a 2-year or 4-year or even graduate level later on to pursue their careers, we really sit down and say, how are we going to do that? Are we going to do that through paying cash, which is very, very difficult to pay fully? Or are we going to look into scholarships? Or are we going to look into grants? And are we looking into work studies? Or what are the different options that are available? Which that's one thing that I believe is very important to teach these children or these students, teenagers, moving forward, because many times they don't have that from their parents who might not have went to college and may not know, that there's an advantage to retaking the SAT, even if you've already attained the score that you need to get into the school you want to. That there's other scholarships that can be reached based off of just that one test.
Right. Share some of the ways that the information you've given these students have changed maybe some of their behaviors or their understanding of finance.
Well, I've taught this class to a good many students throughout the course of offering it. I would say that it's in upwards of probably 200 to 250 students from Hart County High School that are either currently in it or have already been through the class. And there's a few stories that I've heard of some different students who've come back and said, this really changed my life, let me show you how. So for example, I had a student just the other day come back to me. He took my class back in the fall, and he said, I want to tell you that I just purchased something big. And so I'm thinking all right, what is this big thing you purchased? And he's like, I purchased a car. And I said, okay, well, what's your loan like? Who'd you get your loan through? How much did you go into debt for this? And he's like, no, I saved up for this car. He said, I started back in September when you introduced the topic, and just started saving a certain amount every month from my job, and was able to purchase a car for $1,200. And you and I may say, well, $1,200 car, that's not much. But it's a car that will get him from point A to point B, and doesn't have any debt, that will open up many more opportunities for him in the future. And so that's one example. Another student also purchased a car with cash and then kept it till she graduated, and she actually enrolled into the military, enlisted there, and didn't need it in her situation where she was going to be stationed, so she actually sold it and made a few $100s off of that. But without that concept of saving up and putting in the work and the effort to buy it, it really wouldn't promote as much appreciation for the things that they're getting. So I've had a couple of those stories that have really come back to make me proud as a teacher. And there's many others that I'm not mentioning specifically there concerning cars or big purchases. But one of the other areas that I forgot to mention earlier that I wanted to talk about is the last thing we really talk in the class about is the importance of giving back to the community. So that's one thing that I feel like I'm able to do as a teacher, is to give back to the students that I'm working with, and I want it to be kind of a domino effect with them, to have them continue to give back to their community and to help those in need. So we started a project this past December, and I told my students there are 2 requirements, only 2. And the first one is you can't spend any money, and the second one is you can't leave school during school hours to do this. But you have to give back to somebody in need. And it was really amazing to see what our students, our 17, 18-year-old students in Hart County came up with. We had some groups who decided they were going to go and get children's books from the library and record themselves reading these children's books to send to a kindergarten classroom and have those kindergartners sit around and listen to high schoolers read books that are of interest to kindergartners.
Yeah.
That's something that, may not seem like a big deal to a high schooler, but to a kindergartner, which I have a kindergarten son myself, it made a big difference for him to see these, really people he looks up to taking time out of their day to just read to them. It was really
that's
impressive.
Great. I didn't know y'all did that. That's a really good thing.
That's right.
When I'm talking to your classes sometimes, I think one of the biggest impacts that we can show them, and it really gets their attention, is when they look at like financing a house and looking at what over a 30-year or 15-year mortgage. I think what really blows their minds is when they get in there and they see how much they borrowed, but then they look at how much they actually paid for that house over 15 or 30 years. I mean, look at the finance chart. Look at what they actually paid for it.
That's right, Brooks. And a lot of people will say, well, over 30 years it's going to be worth more. But if you look at the interest that you pay, it's really not worth as much as what you actually paid over that 30 years.
How many students have come through your class, you think, over the last
I would say
few
there's
years?
around 250 or so.
Okay.
We've been offering this financial class for about 3 years now at the high school, and each year we've seen the numbers grow based off of word of mouth from previous year students saying, hey, little brother, hey, little sister, you need to go take this class. And we have some who are, having to take this class as their last math class to graduate high school, and we have others who are taking it as an elective. They've already reached their minimum requirement for math, and they say, well, I just want to take this class instead of taking another elective type class as well.
Yeah, and I know you've recently volunteered to help with the College and Career Academy. So tell us a little bit about that. I know it's an adult class, I believe, so talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So the class that we're offering at the College and Career Academy is for adults. It's very similar to the class that we're doing at the high school. It's actually using Dave Ramsey's material called Financial Peace University. This time through, we've had 14 different individuals that have signed up for the class. 2 of those are couples, husband and wife, that are doing the class, and we have anywhere, I think the youngest person in the class is around 22, 23 years old, and we have some who are approaching retirement age. And each one are in there for different reasons, but we meet once a week at the College and Career Academy, and we meet for about an hour on Tuesday afternoons and watch the material from Dave Ramsey, and then we have some time for discussion and just really pouring out our lives before each other and saying, this is what we're struggling with, or this is what we're successful with this week, and talking about how we can improve upon reaching our financial goals, which is really what this class is all about.
So is the class open to anybody, or how do they find out about it?
Yeah. So the class is open to anyone that wants to join us. The way that we promoted it this past time, we did run an ad in the paper. We also placed it on social media through the high school. And we have some members of our class who are high school employees or school employees, and we have some who are just members of the community. But we will be offering the class again in the future. Most likely this summer, we'll be offering it again. probably starting around the first week of June or so. And I would definitely advise you to look at either the paper or into the social media, Facebook or whatever, with the Hart County High School account.
So the class is mainly to teach budgets, to teach just normal everyday financial information that they might need to help their daily lives.
That's right. We call it the baby steps, and we start with very similar to the high school curriculum. We start with saving an emergency fund. In that class, we suggest it to be around $1,000, which $1,000 won't get you much, but it does give you some security when you go to sleep each night, saying that if something were to happen tomorrow, I can make ends meet for a short amount of time. The second step is to get out of debt, which is a big thing for a lot of people. It's been pretty amazing to see, the transformation of some people's thoughts and ideas on is debt a good thing or is it a bad thing, moving forward with their personal finance. And it was surprising to me that, as a group, we collectively, wrote down how much we have in debt, not counting our homes. So, a home is a huge debt that many people have on a mortgage. But a total amount for the 14 individuals was close to $400,000, not counting any home debt.
Really?
So that was amazing to me to see as a group. And it's going to be interesting to see at the end of the course how much of a dent they put into it, or we've put into it as a total class as well. So that's been pretty eye-opening to me as well. And, one of the things we talk about is that when you really look at somebody and you look at them and say, well, they're doing well financially or they're struggling financially. A lot of times we look at the exterior. We look at what kind of car they drive or what kind of home they're in, what kind of clothes they wear. But you can look like you're really well financially and be in just tons of debt because of it.
I've ran into that many times working in banking.
That's exactly right. And so from working in the banking industry, when somebody does come in and say, I want to be able to pursue my dreams of owning a business or owning this home, and they have so much more debt outstanding that they are so much of a liability to you guys.
That's right.
Because of the debts that they already owe.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about what is your dream for the future, and how are you going to be able to reach that financially? So it's just giving them a plan.
Right.
And it's a very non-threatening environment. We don't make anybody share any information they don't want to. It's free to come and share as much or as little as you feel comfortable. So that's kind of what we've been doing for the last about month or so.
So your next class that you do have, what's the maximum amount of people you can have in the class?
Well, we have about 35 spots available for the class this summer. We started out purchasing 50 licenses to offer, or seats to offer to the different people involved. So we've used up about 14 or so, about 35,
There's no
36.
cost?
There is a small cost. The cost is $25 to be able to take the class, and it's a 10-week class. We meet for an hour and a half each week, depending on the type of lesson.
Okay.
But the only reason that we are really requiring the cost of $25 is to kind of make them have some skin in the game, so to speak.
I understand.
Because if there was no cost, we would maybe have all 50 people sign up and then just not show up. So when people put a little bit of money on it, they tend to say, well, I don't want to waste that $25 or whatever it costs. I'm going to go to the class this week.
That's right. So there's some differences in the class you teach your students and the class you teach adults, and you kind of just adjust those.
That's right. So the class I teach to the students is really geared to a teenager. What kind of financial goals does a teenager need to have? Of course, teenagers who are living with their parents have different expenses than adults who are off on their own. So we talk a lot less about owning a home to the students in the class, and we talk a lot more about paying off your home or analyzing the differences in rent versus a mortgage in the adult class. So there's a lot of differences, but that's just one example.
So the College of Career Academy came to you and said there's a need in the community for this.
That's right. That's
kind
right.
of volunteered and stepped up to the plate.
That's right. It kind of all came to be about through the work of a lot of great individuals who are doing a lot for our community. But Brooks Mewburn was very influential in this, as was Anna Strickland with the Archway Partnership, and then also Dwayne Dye really helped out a lot in orchestrating this and getting the ball rolling with this. Moving forward, along with Mr. Gaines, Kevin Gaines at the high school, helped a lot with providing the promotion for this, and also for the ordering of the materials and just everything that goes into offering a program like this. It was not just me, for sure. I'm just kind of the front man to the people who are in the class and get to meet with them. And I get to have all the fun,
There you
so
go.
to speak, with them.
Well, I've been
each week.
to your classes, as you know, many times, and I want to let you know you connect very well with the students, and I think that's key, being able to connect and give them that information. And
Well, thank you very much.
share with us some of the different ways, the techniques that you do that, connecting not only with your students but with the adults
Yeah.
too.
So one thing that I found is essential in being an educator, being a leader, being an employer, anything, is the kind of relationships that you form with those around you. We have the saying in education is that the students don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
And it's the same way many times in the industries that you're in. I mean, you've worked at different banks and different corporations, and you know that as a customer, people have a choice on where they go.
Right.
And there's not really that big a difference between company A or company B, but it's the relationships that they can form in that. So one of the ways that I kind of have found to be effective in my classroom is with my students. I have a student of the day each day.
Okay.
And just give them a note of encouragement and say, hey, you're student of the day, have my seat for today. And they get to sit in my nice computer chair instead of a desk that they normally sit in each day. And they also then help me with some of the different tasks, like putting away supplies or passing out papers. But it just makes them feel special, I believe, and know that somebody just cares enough to write them just a small note of encouragement from one day to the next.
Yeah.
With the other class, the adult version of it, it's just a matter of us as a collective group being willing to not judge people on their status financially, but just being willing to listen and to learn about them individually, and then move forward with hopefully finding a solution, or at least a plan to reach the goals that they're desiring to reach.
Right. Tell us some of the things you see. A lot of those folks, I know you mentioned earlier about credit card debt.
Yeah.
Where do they really get themselves in trouble at? And
Yeah, it's student loans.
That's
the biggest issue, I think, with
Really?
a lot of people. Is they get into the college environment and just say, well, I've got to get a degree and I've got to get it in 4 years and I've got to go to this school and I've got to do it this way, and they really box themselves into the type of class that or type of school that they're going to, and the time frame that they're trying to get done with it in.
Yeah. We talked about earlier about saving money and how tough it is.
That's right.
It's extremely tough to save money. I've got one friend I know real well that does something that hardly I know anybody has done before, but it's very smart to do. He actually puts back into his savings account enough money each month, so when he gets ready to buy something, he doesn't need a bank.
Yes.
He doesn't need to get it financed at all. So that's extremely hard to do.
is.
But if you can do that, it's just absolutely a great savings for people.
That's right. And just so you know, for the future, it's called a sinking fund. I don't know if you knew that or not. Okay, but that's one thing. That's the term we use in our class anyway.
Okay.
So we actually do an activity with our students when we're talking about saving, where they establish a sinking fund for prom. That's a big expense that they have, and some people have parents who pay 100% of it, and others say, their parents may say, well, if you want to go, you're going to have to pay half, or you're going to have to pay the whole thing.
Right.
And so the students look at it and say, I want to be able to spend $300, $400, whatever the case may be on prom. Some people spend a lot more than that. But if that's what they're wanting to spend, and prom is going to occur in 4 months when we do this activity, they know that all they've got to do is take that number that they want to save and divide by 4 and just start putting away that much money each and every month. We've got others who are really wanting to go on like senior trips and things like that, and they know how much that's going to cost, so they start saving for those different things so that they don't have to go to a bank or have to borrow money from their parents and things like that too.
Right.
So I think it's a great idea, but it requires a ton of discipline, especially when you start to see that money start to add up. You're like, wow, I've got this much money I can go and do X, Y, and Z with, when really you're wanting to save for that big end goal.
Yeah, and most people, as you know, want to spend
That's right.
their money just as soon as they get it.
That's right. We really promote 3 areas of focus with our money. We want to teach them how to give.
Right.
We want to teach them how to save, and we want to teach them how to spend responsibly as well. So I believe that's the 3 main focuses of our class that we have, both for the high school students and for the adults that are in the class as well.
Is there any other different classes or different subjects that you think that the school that you might want to be teaching in the future related to finance, or are you pretty much covering everything now? Or
well, this class is covering a lot of the personal finance stuff, like the budgeting you mentioned. At our school, we actually have a time slot at the end of the day called Bulldog Time, where students get to choose whatever they want to go into each day, or not each day, but each 9 weeks. So they sign up at the beginning of the 9 weeks, and we have many different types of classes offered. But one of the students that I taught about a year ago came up to me and said, hey, I really want to know more about stocks and investing. And I thought, well, I don't really have time in class to really focus a lot on that, because there's a ton of different types of investing. So the single stocks kind of get mentioned, but they don't really go into a lot of depth with that. So I said, well, let's do single stock Bulldog Time. And that was what we offered, and we played the stock market game. So each day when people came in, we had I think it was about 15 to 18 students that signed up that wanted to learn more about investing in stock markets. So they would come in and get on their computers and just act as stockbrokers, basically buying and selling stocks. And
yeah, you know, when I was in your class recently and talking to your class, I noticed that you had a list of students, and you would bring them up and show this student has picked, you know, the number one stocks, and, you know, go down the line, and some of them had done a pretty good job and some of them not so. But I thought that was a great example of real world type.
We were able to do the stock market game as a class this past semester in the fall, and we had 81 students and teachers that were participating. And as bad as I hate to admit it, I actually finished in dead last.
You did?
I did.
Oh my goodness!
But I made a pact with the students. I said, I'm not going to buy anything on my own. The only thing I'm going to buy is things that students come up and tell me, hey, this is the best thing ever. So when they told me to go buy, you know, a ton of this kind of stock, I went and put all the money that I could based on our stipulations with the class, all the money I could on that. And then if another student came up in 2 or 3 days and said, hey, I found this stock's doing great, you need to buy all you can on this, I would go and put all my money that I could onto that, and ended up just listening to the advice of, hey, you got to do this and get rich quick. It really made me lose a lot of money in the stock market game that we were playing, the simulation. So it kind of taught them a lesson of, you can't really listen to just what anybody says. You've got to really know exactly what you're doing with this, and take the time to educate yourself more than just, oh, well, so-and-so says do this.
Right.
You know, even if it's their teacher at school saying this is what's best, this is what everybody should do, it's probably not true, because everybody's situation is different. And it really requires you to really put in line, what is your financial situation now? What are your goals for the future? And then what means do you have to be able to reach those goals for the future as well?
Absolutely. Okay, Trey, is there any other thing you'd like our viewers to know or want to tell them before we
No, sir.
wrap it up?
I think we've covered covered the situation pretty
Okay.
good, and I don't believe there's anything else that
Okay.
we've left unturned so far.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I
Yes,
really
sir.
appreciate it.
It's been a joy and an honor. I really appreciate the invite to be on with you.
Well, thanks everybody for being on watching Money Talks. I really appreciate it. And thanks again to Trey Jones. Thanks to Wes Bailey. And we will see you next time.